Hello, everyone. Rhys, Tiller, Dad Jeff, Marcus Mosher. Marcus has joined us. This is his second time. Marcus, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Good. So, Marcus, I want to pub him as much as I can. Locked on Dynasty with I know you do it with Kate, but we're also friends with Ryan and Matt. And Locked on Cowboys, Locked on Raiders, right?
Yep. Do some stuff for USA Today for the Raiders. We have a Raiders podcast over there as well.
Oh, man.
Busy. But that's good. That's what we want during the NFL season, right? We want to be as busy as possible.
Oh, yeah. Because, in the offseason, we're like, hey, what are we going to do with our time?
Yeah, we're reaching for content in the offseason. So you try to soak it up all right now. And the thing is, we were worried for a little bit that we weren't going to have any content during the fall. So this is great.
Oh, it has been awesome. So what do you take the quality of play for the NFL to be this year? You feel it's pretty strong?
Yeah, I thought it's been really good so far. I mean, I know there's been some penalties that haven't been called, and the NFL's trying to do things to get the quality of play up, but I thought it's been great. We've had a ton of exciting games. I thought week 2 was fantastic. So many games coming down to the last couple of possessions. We got a great Sunday night game with the Seahawks and the Patriots. We got another fantastic Monday night game with the Raiders and the Saints. It's been a lot of fun so far.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for anyone, but I think it's a quarterback league, and the quarterbacks are playing well.
Absolutely, and that's what drives these games, right? When you have some great quarterback matchups. Like how much fun was that Cam Newton-Russell Wilson game on Sunday Night Football? That was fantastic.
It's going to get even better this week with Dak Wilson, Brees Rodgers, and Mahomes Lamar. All 3 matchups coming up this week as well.
Yeah, and you didn't even mention Derek Carr and Cam Newton. I don't know why that's not getting as much. But even another one, you get Ben Roethlisberger and Deshaun Watson in a game that Houston has to win. So that's another fun one this week.
And I always like this time of this week going into week 3. Teams are 0-2 and people are screaming. Like the Eagles, the Texans. Teams are 2-0 and we're like, where'd that come from? Maybe the Bills, because all the fantasy community was pro Josh Allen because of his rushing, but he's passed pretty well against 2 inferior defenses. But
he's leading the NFL in passing yards, actually.
Yeah. Jets and Dolphins, but
yes.
we won't asterisk that yet, will we?
No, and that's the hardest thing to figure out about the first couple weeks of the season is what do we overreact to and what do we underreact to? Is Josh Allen really taking a step, or are we going to look back at the end of the season and see, the Dolphins and Jets, those defenses are among the league's worst. We should have seen this coming. The key to winning in fantasy football is figuring out what to put stock in early in the year because we get a lot of data, but a lot of noisy data as well.
Oh, yeah, and that's how it is, I think, in every piece of this world, whether fantasy or not, is we're overwhelmed with data. And we have to figure out, okay, what's important and what should we ignore? And to your point, I even think about like matchups, things of that nature. Because if you go set your lineup, they'll say so-and-so is the 15th ranked defense against this. And you're like, so? Right. And, even with Roethlisberger playing Houston, right? Houston's had 2 great negative matchups. It's hard to hold that against their defense playing against the Ravens and the Chiefs. And so anyway.
And you could also look at it with Roethlisberger, right? He's played a Giants team and then a Broncos team that's lost a ton of talent on defense. So how much stock do we put in Ben Roethlisberger being quote unquote back after 2 weeks? I think this week against Houston will give us a good idea of just what kind of quarterback we're getting there in Pittsburgh.
Especially with all the Deontay Johnson could be a receiver 1 this year in fantasy. I'm not so sure, but I like Deontay Johnson.
The target volume is there. I mean, that's a guy that's been getting double-digit targets over the last 2 weeks. We'll see if they keep feeding him this week against Houston.
Yeah, and also it depends on how teams are defending Juju versus him. So injuries is the topic of the week. I have a feeling, I don't know if Rhys, I don't want to push it onto him like I do everything else, but do you think injuries could be from lack of preseason?
It sounds like it. But, I mean, a lot of these injuries are fluke injuries as well. Like, how do you prepare for torn Achilles and torn ACLs? I don't know if more practice time and more preseason has anything to do with it. A guy like Saquon Barkley isn't probably playing in the preseason anyways in a typical year. So a lot of it is just dumb luck. I do think some of the soft tissue injuries, the hamstrings, that kind of stuff is from a lack of practice in preseason. But some of these big ones to McCaffrey and Cortland Sutton and Drew Lock, who hurt his shoulder after getting hit, I don't think it has anything to do with the shortened offseason.
I also think, like, for Barclays and Sterling Shepard, they know how to deal with the field conditions over in MetLife Stadium. And that's also why the 49ers are thinking about holding back George Kittle, because they don't want him to get re-injured.
Yep, the 49ers play the Giants this week in New York. So it's another one where if anybody is questionable or if anybody's dealing with any kind of strain, it would not be surprising if Kyle Shanahan decided to say, hey, let's hold you back. Let's just wait till we get off this East Coast trip, and we'll be ready to go after week 3, excuse me.
Especially after the way Jordan Reed played. If Jordan Reed didn't play well, then there's, it's different. But you don't know how long he's going to last, but he played well.
And, that's one of the picks in DFS this week that I think is going to be very chalky is, Jordan Reed without George Kittle, got 2 touchdowns, saw a bunch of targets. But anytime Jordan Reed has been healthy in his career, he's been fantastic, even when he wasn't in a Kyle Shanahan offense. So a lot to be excited about there. And I think because he has played so well, I think the 49ers can afford to let him, really rest up and make sure that he's 100% healthy before he's back on the field. I'm glad that Jordan Reed back. The NFL is better when he's on the field.
The more great players, the better. Rhys, you're about to say something?
So I have a question for Marcus over which running back handcuffs you want. Would you rather have Mike Davis in Carolina or Jerick McKinnon in San Francisco?
Yeah, see, this one's not that close to me. I think McKinnon is the better player. He is the far better athlete, one of the best size-adjusted speed athletes that we've ever seen at the running back position. He's in an offense that can run the ball like crazy. 182 yards last week for the 49ers on the ground, despite missing their top 2 running backs. Raheem Mostert's going to be out this week with a knee injury. Sounds like Tevin Coleman's going to be out as well. You might see a little bit of Jeff Wilson in that game, an undrafted rookie free agent. But I'm really excited about McKinnon this week. I think he has RB1 potential against, I think, a pretty soft Giants defense. Now, the interior is pretty good with Dexter Lawrence and, Tomlinson and Leonard Williams, but that linebacker core is bad. We saw what Blake Martinez, how much he struggled against the 49ers last year when he was with Green Bay. He hasn't gotten any better. I think that Jerick McKinnon is going to have a field day against the Giants this year.
Well, the Giants did allow Benny Snell to rush for almost 120 yards on like 19 carries.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a big game for McKinnon.
Yes.
Yeah, and he was a college quarterback. I mean, we forget these guys that are so good, so smart, so, just so strong. And you mentioned about Reed getting all those targets. The only reason I would question that as a chalk is many of that was Garoppolo throwing. We need to parse it out whether it was Nick Mullins who's going to start versus Garoppolo. And so anyway.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it doesn't change, right? I think if Mullins is playing, he's still going to execute the offense. He's played a little bit. He's shown to at least be somewhat competent for a backup, right? I think that's at least being very, generous. I think he can even be better than competent.
Yes.
He's probably not going to be throwing the ball down the field a ton. So a lot of those play action rollouts, throw the ball to Jordan Reed in the flat, let him make plays. I could easily see a 7-8 catch day from Jordan Reed like he had last week.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
But I also see Garoppolo's injury being a good thing for Jerick McKinnon, as they're not going to want to have Mullins drop back 40, 45 times. They much rather feed it to McKinnon about 20, 25 times, call it a day.
And the other thing is McKinnon is a good receiver as well. So with the 49ers not having Mostert and Coleman, it's not all that unlikely that he could get 4 to 5 targets. And with his athleticism, could he turn those 5 targets into 30 receiving yards and maybe a touchdown? I think that's possible. I think Coleman's in for, a big work, or excuse me, I think McKinnon is in for a big workload. 18 to 20 touches seems about right. And then that 49ers offense, that can be a big fantasy day.
Especially if they're playing from the lead. That's the Niners game, is playing from the lead. All except for the Super Bowl. We don't want to, work them too much. But I even wrote this week in one of my articles that I think Mullen starts possibly more games than Garoppolo this year. And not because of this injury, just because I'm not so sure that Garoppolo's the guy. And who's to say Mullins won't be better? Garoppolo he's like Carson Wentz. We had high expectations, but I'm not so sure when that tipping point is that you go a different direction.
The thing that's going to be tough is Garoppolo played well last week before he was injured. He was 14 of 16, 131 yards, 2 touchdowns. Now, a lot of that is on big plays after the catch where he's not doing a lot. But he's been pretty good to start the season. I do think Mullins is one of the better backups in the league. And if he can continue this positive momentum, maybe we do have a little bit of a controversy. Maybe the 49ers will let Garoppolo rest 2, 3, 4 weeks. And if they continue to play really well on offense, it is going to be hard for Shanahan to pull out Mullins, who, they've gotten trade offers for him before for mid-round picks, and they haven't pulled the trigger. So obviously somebody in that building likes him quite a bit. And I think they're excited to see how he plays this week.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And I saw a tweet from Lindsay Theory. I think I pronounced her name right, from the Rams. She covers the Rams. I sent to Rhys. What was interesting is the NFC West is 7-1. The only loss coming in the Niners-Cardinals game. And you have to go back like 15, 18 years since a division started that well. And they beat some decent teams. You look at the Rams beat Cowboys and Eagles. That's decent. Mm-hmm. And so, that division's going to be strong coming down the stretch.
Are you saying the NFC West is better than my NFC East? That's up for debate, right?
By a smidge, right? And so let's jump there, and then we'll get into the Cowboys Raiders. But what do you think of the Eagles starting 0-2?
This division's really bad, and the winner might get 8 wins this season. It's not good. The offensive lines are really struggling right now for all 4 teams. There's a lot of injuries. Something seems weird in that Eagles locker room right now. Even the way that they finished last year, they did not finish particularly strong. There's still this team won a Super Bowl without Carson Wentz, and now that he's back, it seems like he's trying to do too much, and he's actually becoming the problem there. I think this Eagles team is in some trouble. You look at their upcoming schedule. They play the Bengals this week. But they've got games against the Ravens, the 49ers, and the Steelers over the next, month. It would not be surprising to see this team start off 1-5, 2-4. And I mean, we talked about Mullins and Garoppolo. I don't think Jalen Hurts is going to replace Carson Wentz anytime soon. But when you spend a second-round pick on a quarterback and your starter struggles and you're finding ways to get Jalen Hurts on the field, it's going to be a question, right? As should they start to split reps? Should they start to get Hurts more involved? It just feels like something is off with this Eagles team right now.
And the Philly fans, let's call it what it is. Philly fans are not soft, sit on your hands, let's give them another chance kind of fan base, right?
No, and this is a team that, made the playoffs last year. They won the NFC East. They believe they're one of the most talented teams in the conference. And to start off 0-2 and to look as bad as they've looked, to be beaten by double digits in each game, for the offense to struggle this much, I think fans are going to start getting restless. And again, if they drop this game to the Bengals, which I could certainly see after the Bengals had, 10 days off, things are going to get wild in Philadelphia.
Yes, and I've long held this belief, and I don't have a big enough sample size this year, but we overrate the Thursday night performance. And so I think people are going to overrate the Browns this week, underrate the Bengals. And so that's just my, because everybody watches Thursday night. There's no competition for eyeballs. And so anyway, that's just something that I've seen that, that there's this overplaying of that hand. Now let's jump into go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it does feel like one of these games where Philly's looking ahead to the 49ers and the Steelers, where they're going against another 0-2 team that held the number 1 pick last year. If they're not careful, this is a dangerous game because they've got the weapons on the outside to take advantage of some of their problems at cornerback. Darius Slay is really good, but outside of that, their secondary has been a problem. Linebackers have been an even bigger issue. Would not be surprised if Cincinnati puts up 21, 24 points in this game and makes it come down to the last possession or two.
Especially because Bengals' strength at wide receiver. It's not because other stars started as like the Falcons, but it's because of their depth with
Correct.
Green, Boyd, Ross, Higgins, Tate,
Mike Thomas.
Erickson.
The good Mike Thomas from
the good Mike Thomas, the healthy Mike Thomas. I guess we could say that right now, right?
But all they're like 6 or 7 deep at receiver, which the Eagles would rather like right now. And the Eagles have Darius Slay and
that's it.
Yeah.
And in the other area that the Bengals might be able to take advantage of the Eagles is again that linebacking core. Mixon and Giovanni Bernard are really good receivers out of the backfield. So could we see them using them in passing routes to try to expose like a Nate Gary? I think that's possible.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jordan Reed as chalk. I'll take Drew Sample over Jordan Reed this week. We're recording on a Tuesday, and I think Drew Sample, I think he's a 20% favorite over Reed this week, from what we know now. You're talking a beat-up middle of the field for the Eagles. Burrow likes to dink and dunk in the middle of the field.
Almost 25% of his targets last week went to tight ends. In fact, that was his first touchdown, too, to a tight end.
Yeah, and it feels like that's going to be the guy that Burrow's looking for in the red zone. So I think that's a good call. I think Sample, it's not unrealistic to think that Sample could see 7-8 targets this week against a pretty weak Philadelphia defense.
He saw 9 last week.
Saw 9 last week, and Uzoma had another 6 or so. And so, you're talking 15 targets to a tight end position. And A.J. Green looked washed to me. He looked like me playing basketball against a bunch of teenagers. The mind still thinks you can, and the body's just 2 steps slow.
I'm not counting out AJ Green though. I still think he's really talented, and I think you can see spurts of it. I would not be surprised if this is the game where all of a sudden it's 5 catches for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns down the field. If Philadelphia decides to treat Tyler Boyd as the number 1 receiver, put Slay over there, leave AJ Green on the outside. I think we'll know a lot about AJ Green. If he can bounce back after that poor Thursday night performance with all that rest, I think that's certainly possible. Big games coming.
Yeah, I just see him more as like C. Alshon. They can put up spurts. They can do it in the red zone. They can do it but making big plays after the catch, that's the part that I question. But anyway. All right, so let's jump into your Cowboys.
Let's do it.
All right, so first of all, you and I had a very humorous tweet exchange after week 1 because the NFL doesn't know what a penalty, a catch. There's there is no consensus on what is pass interference, right? And do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, they have no idea. I mean, they're just calling it however it best suits them at the time. I'm still mad about that. Every time somebody brings up that Gallup play, it hurts in my heart a little bit that the Cowboys very well could be 2-0 right now. But thanks, Jeff. I appreciate you bringing that back up.
Especially after Claypool threw a Michael Irvin. That was vintage Michael Irvin. Give him the nudge.
He had another one this week. If you watch that Denver game on his long touchdown, he had another push-off that Claypool got away with. So how is a second-round rookie getting these calls and not Michael Gallup? I'll never understand.
But that's Michael Irvin from my childhood. The nudge right before it comes on coming out of the break. Anyway, I still think Des caught it though.
I appreciate it. Everybody does. I'm glad. Even Mike McCarthy now agrees with you. So thank you.
Now that he's wearing the star on his on his clothes. All right, Cowboys. Oh, that was a great game. I wish that the Falcons gave that away. Not as much as the 28-3. I mean, like, you look at it, and if you're a Falcons fan, you're pretty depressed because of the onside kick. You look at the inability to make plays on defense. And so do you think the Falcons as a team, if you're a fantasy guy, you want all your receivers all your running backs, your quarterbacks to face the Falcons every week, right? Because of the way they've been lit up.
Yeah, I think Trubisky with the Bears facing Atlanta this week might be the best play in DFS. I mean, this is a defense that has no idea what to do. If it wasn't for a couple, actually not a couple, the Cowboys had 5 fumbles in the first 4 drives of the game. They only recovered one of those or 2 of those fumbles. If it wasn't for those, the Cowboys could have had 600 yards of offense in that game. I mean, that's how bad this Atlanta defense is. There's mental mistakes everywhere. There's guys on the field that shouldn't be playing. They've had some injuries now. They're playing some young corners. Yeah, you load up on guys that are playing the Falcons, and you should return some big profits there because they can't stop anybody.
Hopefully A-Rob can get going.
You mentioned the turnovers. They also had 2 fake punts that did not succeed either.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas did everything in their possible way to try to give this game away. They gave them the ball inside the 20-yard line. The Cowboys had 5 touchdown drives of 75 yards or further. They never had a short field in this game at all. We can talk about what Dallas did, but this is really just an epic collapse for the Falcons. And it speaks more about how undisciplined and just when they get to the end of games, they panic. They don't know how to close out games, and that's what's so difficult about winning in the NFL. Until you can actually do it, it's hard to win games in the NFL.
And I will say that, like I look around in everyday life, business world, media world, whatever, leadership and coaching dominate. You look at that Belichick-Carroll matchup the other night. Belichick has, half the talent on either side of the ball as Seattle. And for it to come down to a quarterback nobody wanted, let's just say that, and he admitted after the game, maybe I should have bounced outside. Or, we're talking one play in Seattle. Coaching wins. And I don't know, Dan Quinn, what side of the ball did he come from anyway?
Defense.
Yeah. Well, it's always bad when your head coach is a defensive specialist and you can't figure out how to stop anybody, or if your head coach is an Adam Gase who is supposed to be an offensive specialist and you can't even manage to score more than 15, 16 points in a game. So it feels like Dan Quinn is a lame duck coach here, and the offense is doing everything possible to try to get them to survive. It's just not a very good football team right now.
They can find a way to be on offense every time the play is snapped, they will win, right?
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit more about that Atlanta defense. The Cowboys were playing 2 undrafted rookie free agent tackles, a 4th-round pick at tight end who's never started a game, and they had almost 600 yards of offense in that game. And, I mean, Atlanta, you got to be able to create more than just 1 sack on Dak Prescott without those poor offensive line plays. I mean, Pro Football Focus's 3rd worst offensive line after week 1. Dak was pretty comfortable all day in the pocket. It's just a pretty rough group.
Yeah, and that's without Gallup. The awesome catch aside, he didn't really do much, in that game.
He hasn't done much all season. He's only got 10 targets.
Yeah, and here's the thing about Gallup. This is really funny is, it was CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper were the ones that were eating all day. But when it came for the biggest play of the game on a 3rd down, it was Michael Gallup that made a 58-yard reception to put the Cowboys within the 5-yard line to potentially, cut this game to, a 1-score lead. So Gallup's time is coming. There's going to be games where he's the leading receiver. For the first couple, for whatever reason, it just hasn't worked out that way. Don't panic on Michael Gallup. He's going to be just fine.
All right. One thing, so I was huge on Jarwin coming into the season, fantasy-wise.
Mm-hmm.
And then wasn't that big on Schultz, just because, after Jarwin went out, he dropped a pass or 3, last week. And now he looks awesome. I thought Blake Bell had a chance to overtake him because Blake Bell's an okay tight end, over the years. I mean, he's bounced around KC, Minnesota. But can Schultz keep this up? I don't mean target-wise. I just mean play-wise. Does he have a chance?
Yeah, so this is interesting. We just talked about this in the Locked On Cowboys podcast, where Jarwin is without a doubt the better player than Dalton Schultz. He's just more athletic. He's more dynamic. He can make plays after the catch. But Schultz might be a better fit in this offense because he's a better blocker, He's a little bit more reliable when it comes to making catches outside the framework of his body. And now you can actually do some different things with Schultz. You can have him line up in line with his hand on the ground, and you can run plays to the flats that Jarwin couldn't do before. Anytime Jarwin was on the field, he was split out wide or in the slot, flexed out as a receiver. Schultz actually gives the Cowboys a little bit more versatility, and he might actually make their offense a tick better than when Jarwin was on the field. I expect Schultz to be pretty fantasy relevant for the rest of the season just because, defenses are going to try to stop those three receivers. They're going to try to stop the running game. They have to let somebody do the work underneath, and I think it's going to be Schultz. I don't think he's going to catch 9 passes for 88 yards and score every game, but 4 to 5 catches a game for 40 yards and occasional touchdown, I don't think that's all that unrealistic to expect him to sustain that level of production.
Yeah, the only reason I asked that is it's against Atlanta. The Atlanta defense that's bad, and the defense that allowed Greg Olsen to catch a touchdown in week 1. I just trying to separate the correlation from the causation, so to speak.
But right now, let's even go ahead and look at week 3 against Seattle. Right, so Seattle doesn't have a pass rush. They're going to do everything they can to try to slow down the Cowboys receivers. They play a cover 3 defense, which typically forces quarterbacks to throw the ball underneath. Who is going to be the beneficiary of those underneath targets? I think it's going to be Schultz. So I think, yes, the matchup was great for him last week against Atlanta, but I think you're going to see this be a trend of, hey, we got to let somebody do something on offense. Let's make Dalton Schultz beat us rather than Amari Cooper down the field or Michael Gallup.
But for underneath throws, do you think Zeke can keep up his high targets and receiving yard share?
It's going to depend. We just talked about those 2 undrafted free agent tackles in Brandon Knight and Lyle Collins. I think once those guys once Tyron Smith and Lyle Collins get back on the field, Terrence Knight is the undrafted free agent tackle. Once those guys get back, I do think you'll see more targets to Zeke. Right now, the Cowboys are having to keep Zeke in to block probably more than they want. I mean, he still saw 7 targets last week, so it's not like he's not getting action in the receiving game. But when they go against teams that have a better pass rush than Atlanta, which is just about every team in the league, you're going to have to keep him in the backfield. So I think you'll see a little bit of a drop now over the next couple of weeks. But look for that to kind of slowly rise back up as their tackles get healthier.
Especially with Washington's pass rush, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
look at some of the Washington – all right, when I mentioned coaching and leadership, Washington, I think, made a great move bringing in Ron Rivera. I mean, we could point out his mistakes in Carolina. I get that. I just mean them beating Philly in week 1 was pretty spectacular.
He's a leader of men, right? And that's what Washington has needed for a long time, is somebody that can rally the troops and get them to play hard. They had a tough week 2 game, but I expect Washington to be a pretty competitive team this year. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be reflected in their record. I just think they're going to be a tough out for a lot of teams this year.
6-7 wins, something like that.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
no longer the pushover.
No.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think teams are walking in there knowing they're going to get a 3, score victory over them. I think it's going to be one of these every week. If you're watching Red Zone, it's coming down to the last 2 or 3 possessions of the game, and it's going to be fun.
All right, so let's look at Cowboys Seahawks this week. Predictions?
A lot of points. We talked about how bad Atlanta's defense is. Cowboys aren't that far off. I mean,
No.
They're one of the worst defenses in the league. They don't match up particularly well against Russell Wilson, considering their cornerback situation. Trevon Diggs is graded out as one of the worst cornerbacks in the league, according to Pro Football Focus. Chidobe Awuzie has been fine. He's dealing with a hamstring injury now. Jordan Lewis, who is their slot corner, was atrocious in week 2. They can't cover, and they have linebackers that can't cover, and they can't rush the passer right now. So that sets up for another monster game from Russell Wilson. Seattle's defense is not as good as we're accustomed to seeing. The Cowboys should be able to put up points. I think you're looking at a 35-31 type of game with a ton of scoring.
But I think that Dalton Schultz will not be as relevant this week because Jamal Adams was able to effectively stop Hayden Hurst. And I think he can do something similar this week to Dalton Schultz.
And here's That very well could happen. I think Seattle, now that Bruce Irvin is out for the year, they're going to need Adams to create a pass rush. They're going to need to send him on blitzes more often. Marquise Blair, their safety, is out, which probably means more Diggs as a free safety, keeping Adams in the box more. I just think that Seattle's going to have to find a way to create pass rush. They're going to blitz. Prescott loves to throw the ball underneath on blitzes. He's not somebody who typically throws it down the field. It's going to be an interesting matchup. I think how the Cowboys decide to handle Jamal Adams and to see what Pete Carroll does with Adams is going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, especially since the Cowboys defense, as much as we can hammer on them, let's give them the kudos. They shut down Julio. I mean, Ridley went bonkers. Gage had a pretty good game. And so, if they can slow Lockett or Metcalf, the chances get a lot better because,
Yeah, and I would say that their Cowboys are probably going to devote more resources to stopping DK Metcalf. Their goal has always been to limit the big plays, which means Tyler Lockett's probably going to eat underneath. He'll play in the slot some. Again, Jordan Lewis was pretty awful last week. Anthony Brown, their typical slot corner, is on the injured reserve list. I'll look for Lockett, Greg Olsen, and even some Chris Carson in the passing game to perform well.
But you called it on the last time you were on the show with Alden Smith creating some very good pass rush. But he's pretty much been the only guy creating pressure at this point through the season as Everson Griffin. The only time we've really seen him is whenever he was doing his close-up after the onside kick. And DeMarcus Lawrence really hasn't shown up either.
No, Lawrence is dealing with a bit of a knee injury, and he is expected to play, but it's pretty clear he's not 100%. They don't really have any interior pass rush. Tyron Crawford is a guy that's playing there, struggled the first couple of weeks. If it's not Alden Smith getting to the quarterback, yeah, they're going to, it's a problem. And I think Russell Wilson, despite that shaky offensive line, is going to have time to throw in this game. And when he does, he's going to see a lot of receivers wide open. So big game coming for Russell Wilson, probably the third straight big game.
Yes. The one thing for fantasy that I've seen, this just me watching as much football as I can, right, is I don't think Carlos Hyde gets enough love. Chris Carson's been nicked up. Carson's been awesome. Let's just call it for what it was. For a late round pick, he's been awesome. But Hyde, I could see Hyde carrying fantasy players down the stretch.
Yeah, Hyde looked good in his limited action in week 2. And I do think you're right. I think as the season goes along and as Carson wears down, and he typically does as we get into late November and December, it would not be surprising if this becomes more of a 50-50 backfield, right? And potentially they're giving Hyde more of the work, out of the backfield just to limit the touches for Carson. So I think that's a good call. I think if you have the depth or if you have the spots available on your bench, consider stashing Carlos Hyde. I know it's really hard with all the injuries right now, but Hyde could be a league winner on one of the best offenses in the league.
I would take him. This is heresy to many. I would take him over any Giants running back.
Yeah, that feels right because the Giants are going to struggle to score points, right? Even in their week 1 game against Pittsburgh, they only had, 10 points until the final minute of the game. They didn't do much against Chicago. They've got a tough schedule coming up. I don't think any running back in New York is going to put up much fantasy value. So, yeah, I'd rather stash a guy who's not playing right now on a better offense, hoping by the end of the season he finds, 12, 14, 15 touches.
Yeah.
The late, as I believe it was Nick Whalen once explained, the later you go in the draft, the more it's on upside. You want your first couple players, your rocks to be rock solid with high floor. But as you go along, better upside. And Hyde definitely has a much better upside as Carson has a fairly good shot to get injured this year. And if he
right,
does,
you want to tell yourself a story on how these guys can get into your lineups, right? A guy like, let's say, even Devontae Freeman, what would he need to do over a 3-week span to convince you to make him an every week starter? He would probably need to get 19, 20 touches, and he probably would need to get in the end zone. And it feels like a lot on offense. It's really going to struggle to move the ball. With Hyde, it's easy. If he becomes the lead back on this team for whatever reason, he's a plug-and-play starter every single week who could potentially produce, low-end RB1 numbers. So it's not hard to envision a scenario in which Hyde is fantasy relevant pretty quickly.
Yeah, and we look at that. There's probably 10 of those guys. Chase Edmonds, Pollard, McKinnon this week,
Madison.
But once you get past that 10, I'd rather have those 10. I'd rather have Pollard over any Giants running back.
I think Benny Snell's another one, right?
Yes.
You'd much rather have Benny Snell on your team, even if he's only getting 2 or 3 touches a game right now, than a guy like Wayne Gallman, Deion Lewis, Devontae Freeman.
Yeah.
Well, also with Latavius Murray, you'd much rather have him.
Perfect.
As if you're struggling at flex, you can even start him then.
Right, because he has touchdown upside, just like any of the Ravens guys. All right, so Rhys, what are your thoughts on the Cowboys game, and then we'll move on.
High scoring. Want as many players in it as possible.
Load up on those Cowboys and Seahawks.
Yes, and I want to give you your kudos because I was high on CeeDee Lamb coming the season, but low on rookie receivers. If you remember that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to give the rook his due. I mean, Lamb has played great. I mean, much better than I would say even Cowboys fans could have expected.
Yeah, and I think you saw a big jump in his week 1 to week 2 game. You're seeing him be way more confident and more decisive. He made a couple plays at the catch point that were fantastic. And the best part of it all is Dak Prescott trusts him. There was 3 key third downs in that game late in the fourth quarter where the ball went to CeeDee Lamb. And, they had no choice but to trust him. And every time that he makes a play, it's going to pay, tenfold down the line. When they get into the red zone, they're going to start looking for him. I think CeeDee Lamb is going to be a superstar in the NFL. And once he kind of gets his feet underneath him, he knows this offense more. You're looking at big days coming. Has yet to reach the end zone, but you're seeing the targets. You're seeing the way the Cowboys are just trying to get him involved in offense. He's going to have some big weeks here in the next couple months.
But no Cowboys receivers reached the end zone because Dak's only thrown 2 touchdowns, one to Zeke, one to Dalton Schultz.
And he's got 4 rushing touchdowns. So you can see what Mike McCarthy wants to do when they get inside the 5-yard line, right? It's going to be run, and then maybe some occasional passes to the tight ends.
And that's why I would guess this, and we'll move on to the Raiders game, which is still got me pretty jazzed. And I'm not a Raiders fan, pro or con. But having the Cam Newton and the Patriots play Seattle the week before, and you have Dak, gives you great tape for McCarthy. At least that's my view. You can see because Cam threw some lasers, but they used him well.
Mm-hmm. And I expect, although the Cowboys haven't been using Dak a ton as a runner, but I do expect them to have a few plays throughout the course of the game where they use his legs. The Cowboys try to keep him away from big collisions, but when they get inside the 5-yard line, they trust him as much as any player in the league down by the red zone. A different type of runner than Cam. Dak is a strong, powerful one, but a little bit more wiggle to his game. I think he's maybe better on the read options kind of stuff, but I expect the Cowboys to find ways to use Prescott's legs in this contest.
Yeah, I was just thinking if you could list a few quarterbacks to play the Seahawks the week before, having Cam do it is a good thing.
Absolutely.
So let's talk Raiders Saints. I thought, looking at it, and I think there's some overreaction to Brees. Brees looked to me like he had the last, into last year. His arm strength isn't there. His accuracy's okay. The pick he threw, he threw that pick last year. He just doesn't have Michael Thomas to help him, and now we're all going crazy, right?
Right. I was going to say the dirty secret of the Saints is that this team isn't about Drew Brees anymore, right? It's just the overall talent on both sides of the ball, and Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas. They don't need Brees to be great anymore to win a Super Bowl, right? And I think that's a lot of talking heads believe that this team can't compete in the NFC unless Brees is playing at an elite level. That's not true. There's a lot of talent on this team. They just didn't play up to it on Monday night.
No, and Kamara looked good, and
Really
so did
good.
Josh Jacobs. And so, Jacobs has to, and I didn't have him high enough, but Jacobs has to, especially with injuries, be considered a top 3, top 4 fantasy tailback for the rest of the year, right?
Yeah, I would agree. So the argument going against Jacobs earlier in, the offseason when we were doing all of our rankings was so many were worried about the game script, right? They started the season with Carolina, and then it's a murderous row of teams between the Saints and the Chiefs and the Buccaneers. Um, but the thing I think a lot of people forgot to consider is that Josh Jacobs is just good at football, right? And the more that Josh Jacobs gets the ball, the closer they're going to be in games. I mean, in the 13 games, he played in last year, they won 7 of them. I mean, that's not doesn't seem like a big number, but he's good. He's just a good football player. And I think anytime they're close in games, and even if they're only down a score or maybe even 10 points, they're going to feed Josh Jacobs. John Gruden over the offseason talked about how they went away from him too many times last year when games started to get a little out of hand. They know that he's arguably their best player on offense. Darren Waller's pretty good too, but he's just really good. And I think with his ability to win as a receiver, he can stay on the field. He block. His ability to take a big workload and still be productive is something that Gruden loves. Yeah, I mean, we could have this conversation right now, but I think Ezekiel Elliott might be the number 1 running back you want for the rest of the season. But after Zeke and Kamara, Jacobs might be number 3 for me.
Right. And I hear Jonathan Taylor, and I just don't. All right, I love the Rook. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's those are dynasty players viewing redraft as such. We're only looking at the next 14 games, 15 weeks. Who's going to produce? And Jacobs looked great last night.
Yeah, and again, they've got a big offensive line that was missing 2 key guys, and Richie Incognito and Trent Brown, 2 of the best run blockers in all of the NFL. If they get those guys back, you'll suddenly see Jacobs' efficiency go way up. And if his efficiency rises on 30 touches a game, you're talking about a fantasy superstar. So if you got him in the 2nd or 3rd round of your fantasy draft, you're loving life right now.
Oh, yeah, hold on tight. The one disappointment I had with the Raiders, so I thought Carr looked great. Waller looked great. I was a little confused at the inability to, and maybe unwillingness, let's give that as an option, to get Ruggs more involved, even if it's screens, slants, something of that nature. Is that your thought, or did you think that played out like you'd expect?
It played out a little bit the way I expected this week for one reason and one reason only. Henry Ruggs didn't practice this week. He didn't do anything on Thursday, didn't do anything on Friday, was listed as limited on Saturday. And by limited, he had his helmet on and he was on the field. That's it. He's still dealing with an ankle injury. They were really picking the spots to use him yesterday. But you can see that he's still going to be a big part of this offense. Remember, in one of the biggest plays of the game yesterday, a 3rd and 2, the Raiders needed to convert to prevent the Saints from going on the field. What did they do? They took a play action shot down the field to Henry Ruggs. He drew the pass interference call. Doesn't help fantasy owners, but what it does tell you is this is still the guy that they're going to trust when they need to convert. So I know the fantasy production was rough, 1 catch for 4 yards. But this is somebody that the Raiders really believe in and believe is going to be a superstar sooner rather than later.
And so that, and then on the Saints side, not going to Sanders was a little surprising to me. I like the Traquan. I like Traquan's ability. I thought he looked good. But the inability to, or unwillingness to force it to Sanders if you have a noodle arm quarterback seemed a little curious to me. Or Cook. Cook didn't get that much action.
No, Cook had 5 targets, caught just 2 passes for 13 yards. Now, he did get the touchdown to help save his fantasy value, but the Emmanuel Sanders usage is weird. Just 3 targets. You would think that would be a guy that would be perfect for Brees, right? Somebody who gets open quickly, can create quick separation, make plays after the catch. But it just doesn't feel like he's fitting in all that well. In week 1, he caught a touchdown, but it was really, really late in garbage time. I'm starting to get concerned that this pairing between the Saints and Sanders just isn't working out.
Yeah, the one thing I would tell fantasy owners from watching that game really intently, not that everybody else didn't, right? Everybody wants to say, oh, yeah, my opinion matters because I watch so much film. But anyway, that Traquan Smith got his numbers because he was playing the Thomas role. When Thomas comes back, I still think it'll be Thomas and Sanders. Traquan will be the 3. Traquan is basically your Thomas insurance. Is that how you saw it pretty much?
Yeah, I would agree. Now it's frustrating a little bit on Traquan because I do think he has some ability to win down the field, and I just don't think under this version of Rhys that part of his game is going to be unlocked. So maybe in a dynasty version of Traquan Smith, he's a better play than redraft. But I do think this year Traquan's probably filling in for the Michael Thomas. Maybe you get 2-3 weeks out of wide receiver 3 production. But yeah, I don't think he's somebody that's going to win your league for you this year.
Yeah, that's how I saw it. So let's talk Waller. Waller was awesome last night. I mean, the Saints knew what Saints top end defense, let's call it that way. They knew what was coming because Carr, like we talked about, Breeze's inability to throw down the field. I think Carr has the ability, but chooses to go, or other than the bomb to Ruggs that threw the penalty. He loves hitting some Waller and Jacobs underneath and some Jalen Richard.
Mm-hmm.
And so what do you think about Waller? I mean, that wasn't sustainable, but he sure looked good.
Yeah, so before I talk about Waller on the field, I just want to talk just really quickly about him off the field. It's so easy to root for him. This guy has an infectious personality. The struggles that he's overcome is just fantastic, and he's so easy to root for. So he was one of the players. Listen, fantasy football is supposed to be fun, right? You're supposed to want to be able to root for your guys. I took Waller in the 5th round of a lot of my leagues just because I want him on the team. When he's performing well, I feel good. When he's putting up the numbers that he did on Monday Night Football, I feel really, really good. Is it sustainable? No, he's not going to catch double-digit passes a game, but he is their best offensive weapon at receiver, right? And he fits Derek Carr's skill set so well because he can get open quickly. He can make plays after the catch. You saw it last night. There was a couple third downs where Carr threw the ball 2 or 3 yards short of the stick, and Waller was able to rip off tackles and make the first down. He is going to see a ton of targets throughout the course of the season. The Raiders have done fantastic things to open him up, get him in the slot, get him against mismatches, match him up against linebackers. He's doing a better job of finding soft spots in the zone. Actually, the addition of Jason Witten has helped a lot because it's helped them learn some techniques about how to get off the line of scrimmage quicker and get into your route, how to locate the ball faster when you're turning your head around. So I just think this is a great fit, and I think it's a great quarterback fit. I do think he's going to eclipse 1,000 yards for the second straight season. If he can see that touchdown total rise from just 3 last year to 6 or 7, he could challenge Travis Kelce for the tight end 1 spot this year. I love Darren Waller. I think he's just a stud.
Yep. And all right, so Carr played well to end last year, and people don't want to give him his credit, and I assume you feel that way too. He played well to down the stretch. They give him all new weapons: Ruggs, Edwards, even Aguilar's an upgrade over Tyrell. I think. I don't want Raiders fans hating me.
No, you're right. I think you're right. No, you're good.
That Carr's got a chance to get an extension with the Raiders.
I think
his career.
I think so. We saw last year in year 2 under Gruden, the highest completion percentage of his career, the most passing yards of his career, the highest passer rating of his career. Everything indicated that he was making the right steps in John Gruden's offense. Now, if they could tweak the receivers, which they did, it could help unlock a further, a better version of Carr. We're seeing that through 2 weeks. I mean, the volume isn't going to be there. He's not going to be a guy to throw for 350 yards every week. But could he be 250 yards and 2 touchdowns most weeks? I think so. I think he's a pretty valuable, high-end quarterback 2, maybe a low quarterback 1. And yeah, I think there's a chance if things go the way that the Raiders are hoping, that he could be back next year, and that if Ruggs and Edwards continue to improve, that this could be not a top 10 offense, but a top 12, top 13 offense. I think so. I think there's a lot to be encouraged about with Derek Carr right now.
Well, especially the division's down. Rhys's boys are banged up. The Chargers look like a dumpster fire. I don't want to. So I take Anthony Lynn to be a good guy, good human.
Absolutely.
But after watching Herbert play, there's no way I could say that you should go back to Taylor.
Yeah, he's too tied to Taylor, right? They had that nice season in Buffalo where they went to the playoffs and they lost to Jacksonville. But it's Tyrod Taylor, man. You know the future. There's Herbert. Why not just embrace it? The offense just seemed like it worked better and it flowed better. And that's the way that it was designed, to have somebody like Herbert getting the ball to Keenan Allen and Eckler and Mike Williams. Why go back to Tyrod? I have no idea.
But the thing that I was taught last week with the Chargers have a pretty good defense against running backs, with Hilaire not doing much.
Mm-hmm.
Mixon hasn't done much. And those were 2 out of the top 12 running backs drafted on average last season.
Yeah, the Chargers have a fun defense. It's too bad that we don't get to ever see Derwin James a part of it, because that could be just an elite unit. But there's a lot to like about the Chargers, and I think if they would eventually just lean into this Herbert thing and really embrace him, could they steal that 6th or 7th wild card spot in the AFC? I think it's open, and I think they've got the defense and they've got the talent and offense to do it. Unfortunately, I don't think Anthony Lynn is going to allow them to get there.
Yeah, which will probably say, just like we talked earlier about leadership, it speaks volumes. And some coaches are well known for their loyalty or their bias against certain players. I never appreciated Mike Tomlin more than when Antonio Brown leaves and you see him having problems in other places, right? And Tomlin did a great job with that situation, at least outwardly.
Yeah, and there's a lot more to that story that people don't understand of how great Tomlin was at keeping that locker room together, with Le'Veon Bell and his contract stuff, and Antonio Brown and Roethlisberger and some of the infighting that they had. That's a perfect example of why leadership matters so much in the locker room.
Right. And all right, I know you live in the land of Steelers fans, but I don't think my Steeler fans friends, I had to say that slowly so I didn't butcher it, appreciate Tomlin. And I don't mean for longevity. I mean, he had Mason Rudolph on the playoff cusp, right? He had
Evelyn Hodges. I mean, they were into week 17. They had a chance to make the playoffs with by far the worst quarterbacking situation in the league, with a team that couldn't run the ball. Yeah, Tomlin's ability to keep that team relevant and competitive for a decade is so impressive.
In a tough division. I mean, we're talking about them, and we know that Baltimore's good. I think Cleveland's way overrated. We didn't talk Burrow. What do you think about Burrow this year? You liking what you saw?
Yeah, I do. It's unfortunate that he's playing behind maybe the worst offensive line in the league, but you can see that he has, I hate to use the cliche, but right? He has it. And the whole offense seems like it's just, it has so much more energy than what we saw last year with Andy Dalton and Ryan Finley. And these guys are excited about, hey, if I get open and I beat my guy, the ball is going to be there, right? And I don't think guys like Tyler Boyd and A.J. Green always expected that to be the case. So he's certainly going to have his lumps. There's certainly going to be times where it's a 3-interception day with 2 fumbles because the offensive line just couldn't protect him. But there's a lot to be excited about there. And I think Zach Taylor, the Bengals coach, is starting to embrace this wide open offense where you let Burrow make all the decisions at the line of scrimmage, let him play rather than, so many times when we see rookie quarterbacks, we see coaches get so conservative. Let's bring in everybody. Let's play a ball control style of offense. I love that Zach Taylor's opening it up, and they're going to live and die by Joe Burrow. I love it. I think that's smart.
Oh, yeah. Rhys, what do you think the Raiders game this week? Who's going to win?
I think the Patriots are going to beat the Raiders. No offense, but the Seahawks defense, with Cam Newton playing as well as he did, I don't think the Raiders defense can compete. Even though they did a fantastic job against the Saints, don't know if they can compete if they allow 30 to the Panthers. What they can do to Cam Newton.
Yeah, Gruden has, I think it's a 23% winning percentage when he has to play a 1:00 game on the East Coast. And then when it's against Belichick, who's had basically an entire extra day to prepare, coming off a loss. The Raiders played a Monday night game that was, really intense. Would not be surprising if they show up a little flat in that game. Now, I think the Raiders do have some talent, and they can do some things on offense to potentially run the ball through New England. That seems to be a little bit of their kryptonite lately. But I just think New England has the better coach here. They don't lose at home very often. I expect this to be a pretty easy New England win.
The thing about New England, though, the Ravens ran the ball every play, or a good running team can run the ball every play, they can probably win because the New England strength is their defensive backfield.
Mm-hmm.
J.C. Jackson, Stephon Gilmore, the McCourty brothers. If you run the ball, you're basically taking their skill set out of the game and putting it on Derek Rivers. I'd much rather, if I'm going to go up against Belichick in that Patriots defense, I'm going to want to try to run the ball down their throat. And
I
that's
agree.
what I think the Raiders should do.
I agree. I think you're going to see a very run-heavy script from the Raiders. One of the things I'm really curious to see is what does Belichick do with Darren Waller? Most of the time, he doesn't let your best player beat you, right? So is he going to put Stephon Gilmore on Darren Waller, or is he going to put Gilmore on one of the outside receivers and just double Darren Waller all across the field and force Carr to throw it to, Brian Edwards against J.C. Jackson or Henry Ruggs against Jason McCourty? How Belichick decides to defend Waller is one of the things I'm the most intrigued about with this week.
Well, I don't think you could put Gilmore on him, considering Gilmore just was getting bodied very badly by DK Metcalf. And DK Metcalf's not near as big or as strong. I don't know as strong, but he's not as
Yeah,
heavy.
he's pretty strong. He might be faster, though, too. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting. I mean, I think Gilmore could do it. I think Gilmore's going to be anxious to overcome that bad game. And listen, it wasn't all that bad of a game. I mean, it was just a couple of perfect throws by Russell Wilson to make plays. But, Metcalf is an animal, man. He's hard to stop.
But the thing I saw is 2 out of Gilmore's past 4 games, he has not done as well. I don't know what Metcalf had. Did he have 100 yards receiving?
Metcalf did because he hit the big one where
Yes.
Gilmore tried to take the underneath and Metcalf went to the flag, and it was a perfect pass. When you mentioned Belichick taking the best player out, I really enjoyed his exchange with Chad Johnson, Ocho Cinco, when before the game he goes, "Yep, we're going to take you out. You might as well just get your helmet, go sit down because we have the double 85 play on." I don't know if you've seen that, but the look on Ocho Cinco's face is like, anyway, it was pretty funny.
Yeah, he knew right in the game that he wasn't going to get very much action. So I think it's funny. I mean, Belichick has always done that, right? He's always tried to figure out ways to force offenses to use their non-best player to beat them. Between the Steelers and all those years, he would take their second corner and put a safety right over top of Antonio Brown and force Roethlisberger to use a Sammy Coates to beat them. And traditionally, it hasn't worked for Pittsburgh and all these other teams. So it's always fascinating to see what Belichick does on defense. And I think this is going to be another interesting matchup.
I think he should do pretty much the same thing whatever he does to Travis Kelce. Or even Kittle.
Yeah, and those are tough matchups for them as well. They like to try to use a little bit of bracket coverage. Maybe Belichick just doesn't have the linebackers this year to do it. And that's why it's going to be an interesting battle between Belichick and Gruden here.
Yeah, because they lost. We talk about their losses on the offensive side. They lost a lot on the defensive side. Plus, they played in Seattle without James White. They, just mourning for their brother. And I mean that, those locker rooms are brotherhoods, and you have a brother that's going through that. And so here's my last question for you, and it's loaded as all get out. Belichick loves being the underdog, right? Mm-hmm. He loves that. He relishes
rarely it.
Right, but he relishes it. Who's if you're having to pick a favorite for the AFC East division, who are you choosing?
For the longest time this offseason, put a lot of money on Buffalo, right? There's just a lot to like about this Buffalo team. I think they're incredibly mentally tough. I love the way that Sean McDermott is coaching this team. But I'll be honest, when I saw what Cam did on Sunday Night Football against Seattle, even in a loss, it made me really nervous because this is the MVP caliber Cam Newton we're seeing. And, when you see that version and then you realize that you bet against Bill Belichick, man, I really regret putting all that money on Buffalo. So I still think it's probably going to be New England. But Man, I think Buffalo and New England last couple weeks of the season are going to decide this division. I think the one that probably gets to 10 wins probably wins it, but it's a lot of fun.
And injuries to the offensive skill players will determine it. Rhys, you have any last questions for Marcus before we say adieu? We appreciate your time, Marcus. We enjoyed talking football.
We're talking about the AFC East. Which AFC East team do you think will finish worst? The Gase Jets or the Brian Flores Dolphins?
The Jets. I have a hard time believing they're going to get to 4 wins this season. That just seems like a train wreck waiting to happen. The receiving core they have out there is atrocious. The offensive line is worse. The linebackers are becoming a major problem. They can't rush the passer. If I asked you what they do well, I'm not sure that you could give me an answer. It just doesn't feel like Gase is going to be there for very long. And poor Sam Darnold, man. You see, he's trying every week. He's making some incredible throws. I just want somebody to rescue Sam before his career gets ruined.
Before he gets Josh Rosen, if I can make that into a word. You know, like Rosen and Darnold, I thought still have enough talent to be starters. If Rhys's boys, the Broncos, can sign Blake Bortles off of the street, you can't tell me that Darnold or Rosen can't be viable.
Yeah, when I watch Darnold, I just keep imagining what would have happened if he's in the situation that Josh Allen is in Buffalo, right? Where he has a great defense. They don't need him to make every play. Where in the Jets, arguably the worst wide receiver core in the league, arguably the worst offensive line, you're asking him to be a superstar every week, and yet their passer ratings for the last 20 games are very similar. I'm still a Sam Darnold believer, and I probably will be forever, and that'll be one of my biggest flaws and mistakes, I'm sure.
Well, he's still young. He's like 23.
Exactly. Yeah, I think he's almost a year and a half younger than Joe Burrow?
Yes.
If the Jets get one of the top 2 or 3 overall picks, do you see him taking Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields to replace Sam Darnold?
Yes. Probably. It'll probably be a new administration, a new coaching staff, and they'll look to trade Sam Darnold, and a team like Pittsburgh, who's looking for a young quarterback without having to spend a first-round pick, will pick up Darnold, and they'll probably win a Super Bowl just to spite us.
But for the Packers to pick Jordan Love over some of the other players, whenever you could wait and try to trade for Sam Darnold, that just seems –
or sign Cam Newton or sign James Winston.
Yeah. I mean, there was a team this year that traded for Nick Foles, right? I mean –
Yeah, there's some head scratchers, but so I live in a world outside of football for main job, and I will tell you there's 2 theories that live in every industry. One is sunk cost. Whatever, we see that with draft capital, that John Ross is still getting chances that he shouldn't have. The other is we get stuck in the debt of old contracts, and that's the other reason that they will go away from Darnold, because they want a rookie contract instead of having to pay Darnold. And so those 2 theories will always live on. And that's why the good NFL teams make sure they don't have any long-term contracts that are bad, and they'll make sure that they draft well, or pretty well.
Yeah, a perfect example of the sunk cost fallacy, right, is, look at what Arizona did with Kyler Murray, right? They just drafted Josh Rosen the year before. They very well could have said, listen, we believe in Rosen. We had a high grade on him. Let's write it out. Let's build everything else. But they saw there was an elite talent in Kyler Murray, and they drafted him. They didn't care that they spent a first-round pick on Josh Rosen the year before. They went and got out and got the player that they believed was better. I would say most teams wouldn't do that, right? And that's why I think that one correct decision, despite I don't know how many other bad draft picks Arizona made in the last decade. I mean, it's a handful. That one correct decision has made them a contender in the NFC. I don't think a lot of teams have would have the foresight to do that.
Or the huevos.
Yeah, exactly.
He's looking at me like, what's that mean? I'll just talk to you later.
But another team that do you see the Redskins or football team moving on from Haskins if they get a high draft pick, going for a different Ohio State quarterback, or Trey Lance, or even Trevor Lawrence if they're that bad?
That's a good question. I like Dwayne Haskins pre-draft, so I'm a little bit biased here when I say this. I think Haskins is in a difficult situation. It's pretty clear that he's a good leader, that the team believes in him. The offensive line is bad. Wide receiver core outside of Terry McLaurin is bad as well. But if you have a chance to get somebody like a Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence, you probably aren't passing up on those guys. But this is a big year for Haskins. We saw at the end of last year, the last 4 games, a passer rating of 98, played pretty well. I think there's going to be moments this year where Haskins shows his talent. It's just going to take him a while. So we'll see. Luckily, we still have 14 games before Washington has to make that decision. And I think by the end of the year, we'll know one way or the other.
Yeah, that's a great way for us to finish. We appreciate your time, Marcus. We hope you'll come back another time later this year. Keep up the cheering on for the Cowboys and Raiders. I'm glad you made it through because those were some heart-pounding games.
Yeah, I'm shocked that I'm still alive right here. But thank you guys so much for having me, and I can't wait to be back on.
Thank you.